Alex Hanser here. It is January 7th, 2016. The topic of this podcast is how the so-called Patriot community dropped the ball and missed the memo on Costilla County. Costilla County is located in southern Colorado, and for years people have migrated to this part of the country to live off the grid, and that has only increased in the last few years. And I returned to Costilla County. I left my home state of Oregon. Not the first time I left Oregon. And I drove in an RV to Costilla County to buy land and live off the grid. And in past videos, I've talked about this place as being an excellent location to build your off-grid retreat. It's a great place to strategically relocate. For those of you that are familiar with the work of Joel Skousen, I also have been looking at different places in America that are ideal for getting away from dense population centers, ideal for surviving a serious ordeal, perhaps a national emergency, perhaps a massive power outage. So I've always seen this part of the country, Costilla County, as a great place to get away from the major cities, even if your only motivation is appreciation of nature, just getting away from it all. Well, earlier this year, that freedom that people have experienced out here for so long, it began to change. And so for whatever reason, we're not going to speculate in this video, but there are other factors that may be influencing the decisions of Costilla County. They stopped issuing permits for people to live in their RV off the grid on these cheap plots of land. And demonization campaign began, stemming from some locals in San Luis, claiming that most of the people came out here to grow marijuana and steal their water and dump trash, basically that they're outlaws. In addition to that, they were labeled white supremacists, simply because there's a lot of white people that are buying the land on eBay and buying the land on websites where cheap land in the desert, in different states, is sold for several $1,000s. And a lot of this land you can finance. You can put $100 down or $500 down and make land payments of less than $100 or several hundred a month, depending on how much land it is, what it's valued at. So they've been running people out of here. Veterans that served this country. Quite a few veterans, in fact. And we got the word out that this was taking place, that they were illegally pushing people off their land and using land use codes to drive people out, saying that they would become a criminal if they stayed on their land after 10 days. So they're going around saying you have to have this type of a septic system. They're even pushing for a well. And cabins or homes over 600 square feet, which pretty much, puts the whole tiny home concept in the garbage. And so people that own their land outright, it's a land rights issue. It's a property rights issue. People that own their land outright, hold the title. They've been pushed off their land. So we got the story out there. And a lot of the survival blogs and websites pretty much ran with the same type of headline they usually run with when discussing off-the-grid living. The government is banning off-the-grid living. And in some cases, they didn't even focus on Costilla County. They talked about it like it was the federal government. And what I noticed about that, and I talked about it as it was happening, we could have used that semi-viral media attention that we had for a few days to a few weeks to organize peacefully. Now, in that type of a situation, we have a corrupt Costilla County. You don't have someone in there representing you. So as far as politically, the odds have been stacked against the off-the-grid residents. 800 estimated off-the-grid residents in a county of 3,600. Now, some of the Hispanics that have been here for some time, that have inherited land that was left behind, have been afraid that allowing new residents to come here and live would be something that would jeopardize their water supply, their ability to access water. Now, Colorado is going through somewhat of a drought, and sometimes some people do move into an area and they don't respect the land. They litter, or they take more water from the well than they should. But we saw a segment of Costilla County, the locals, demonizing all outsiders. And I saw racism, and others saw racism in a former Facebook group that used to exist called SLV Just Us. They would call the white people gringos. They would share their fears of the invading Anglos. And that was really sad to watch. A whole group of people demonized out of a fear of outside invaders. And aspects of this community would claim that the land that these newcomers bought was stolen land that they in fact owned. And there was Mecha and La Raza ideologies that were thrown at the newcomers to guilt trip them about their race and the fact that they moved here. As again, the allegations kept coming. You don't own this land. It's stolen land. You're a criminal. You're an outlaw just for being here. You came here to break the law. Why didn't they take that up with the county? The fact that the county for years has been selling land. And then, of course, you have the tax lien sales. And it's through the tax lien sales that a lot of these larger landowners that don't live here, that buy and sell land, they sell the land for a few years, the person doesn't pay their taxes, they mark up the cost of the land, and they sell it. And so I don't believe that that is a legitimate claim, that newcomers to Costilla County are buying stolen land. Those locals in San Luis need to take that up with their county. They need to see the role their county has played for years in selling land to newcomers. And so the story got out there, but instead of people contacting higher courts, I'm going to tell you what we got. What we got was a guy named Roger Marsh who got wind of what was taking place. He came down claiming he owned land here. But in reality, he was actually staying at the Grizzly Motel in Alamosa, Colorado. And he had his own wannabe militia, which was really several Facebook pages going by the name of Operation Patriot Rally Point. Like, rally around me, I'm a patriot. He also claimed to be a veteran. And this guy who had warrants from multiple states, with an alcohol problem and an attitude problem, and a drill sergeant attitude about him, he waltzed in here and got some people to listen to him. And he made claims that his common law sovereign citizen friend Bruce Doucette was a Supreme Court judge. He actually got this guy on the phone, and they staged in front of a crowd of people. I filmed it. This pretend we the patriots, we the sovereign citizens, we the common law judges, we're coming to Costilla County to save the day. And the whole thing was a fraud. A fraud that actually continued after Roger Marsh was removed from the picture. He actually got a bunch of people to rally together, and he started to scream at people. And he shouted that no cameras would be involved. He was interested in his own militia, and he was aided by a Tony Thrones character who's disappeared from the scene, and a guy who I believe was from Romania. And they didn't necessarily look like ex-military, but they were acting like they were trigger pullers. And Roger Marsh would say he's a trigger puller. And on the Roger Marsh Facebook page, but he also used an alias called Colt Sievers. or something really close to that, which is like a fictional character from a movie or comic book. Not too indifferent than the whole V for Vendetta thing. It's amazing how many potential feds hide behind that whole anonymous thing or V for Vendetta and use certain memes that they think will, bring people forward. The Masked Man Avenger, the superhero, the G.I. Joe ex-military patriot, who just so happens to be, in this case, the counterfeit patriot, freaked out about a non-existent Islamic invasion. And most of the posts on Roger's Facebook page was more or less homicidal ramblings about all the Muslims he wanted to kill. And as soon as he and Bruce Doucette came on the picture, so did all these other common law folks, also freaked out about a non-existent Islamic invasion, making claims that they had the authority, that they had judges and marshals. They claimed that U.S. marshals, like federal marshals, like the real deal, were coming to Costilla County to tell those holding seats in Costilla County that they were holding office illegally. Holding office illegally. Now, we're definitely dealing with a shady county, Costilla County, that doesn't like to put a lot of its stuff out there on the internet. Information about the Costilla County members or seat holders, county commissioners. They like to remain in the shadows. But that doesn't mean that it makes sense to listen to someone that claims that they're a superior court judge, common law for the continental of U.S. And so, okay, if this guy Bruce Doucette was legit, there should be some stuff about Bruce Doucette on the internet. So I looked and I looked and I looked, and there were like these really obscure blogs that referenced him. With a printout letter, I, Bruce Doucette of the Continental, and it looked like legalese. And people see the format of these letters, and he was posting these in the groups, saying that he himself, this one-man legal army, is here to save the day and serve the county commissioners of Costilla with papers. And actually, Sylvia Lobato, a great author, she wrote an article this week in a local paper, discussing these letters from Bruce Doucette to Costilla County, basically charging them with their illegal actions. There is and was never anything legit about Bruce Doucette, who also happened to be really into the flat earth hypothesis. This new wave of hysteria that's sweeping the research community, that the earth is flat and everything is fake. I guess there's no sun either, or solar flares that impact different parts of our planet based on rotation. I guess that's all fake too. And so we live in a world where people see the value in the U.S. Constitution, and they see the illegal actions of the federal government. And they see that the Patriot Act isn't patriotic. So what does it mean to be a patriot? Well, if you don't have the background information, if you don't know that there is a sharp increase in federal operations trying to set up sovereign groups, trying to radicalize Americans that just want to be left alone, sadly, they seem to be targeting off-the-grid communities as well. If people don't know that there's a setup, then they could be easily led into a trap. If they start thinking that a stand down with the cops is the only way to resolve this. So what Roger Marsh did is he got a few people to rally around his idea. His idea of a revolution. And the question was Roger Marsh a federal agent there to entrap veterans, vulnerable and susceptible to his influence, the power of suggestion, to entrap them, to put them on the list? Was he working with other agencies that we don't know about? Was he doing this to get off of some sort of charge that he may have had himself? How many deals is the FBI going out and making with certain people that are getting in trouble with the law and saying, we can get you out of trouble with the law if you infiltrate these patriot groups or try to create out of thin air a militia, using people that just want to be left alone so they can live in peace. It's also possible that Roger Marsh was suffering from mental illness, whether it was PTSD caused by actual service, or whether or not Roger Marsh was just another dime or dozen con men, snake oil salesmen. So a lot of media went out, a lot of blogs about off-the-grid living becoming illegal, leaving a lot of people observing this wondering, whether they lived here or were planning to move here, that already own land here. People were and are looking for a sign. Well, what do we do next? What's the next step? Is Costilla County like a no-go zone? Is Costilla County still a place that I can invest land in? And the fact is, people don't have those answers because they're not getting calls back from the land use office. Now, Matthew Valdez has resigned for personal reasons and other things going on behind the scenes. And so Costilla County hasn't really done much to work with the citizens, the potential new residents, to tell them, okay, this is how much money you need to live here legally in our eyes. This is what you need, and this is how it is. Now, they're probably going to do that at some point this year. And what is really taking place is they're trying to sweep the area of its lower income residents. And they're going to change Costilla County. They're going to attempt to draw in more wealthy investment. And there already is wealthy investment from insider traders, hedge fund managers like Louis Bacon, who's bought hundreds of thousands of acres of land in this area, in this county, and he actually gave half of it to the federal government. So there's definitely something else going on here that we need people in the alternative media to research and investigate, to flush out, to get to the bottom of what is taking place in Costilla County. I don't have all the answers, but I certainly have single-handedly come up with many, many clues. And the severity of the situation is very serious if there is major wealthy outside investment, because it's going to infect the worlds, in not a good way, of those Hispanics that live in San Costilla and San Luis. Their land will also be targeted by wealthy interests. They will be affected. So that's my message to them. We're going to have to find a way, some of us, to get beyond our own fear of each other and resentments over the idea of scarce resources. As time goes on, we need to become vigilant and aware of all those wealthy interests in this county and elsewhere. And so the issue in Burns, Oregon with the BLM is significant. There is BLM corruption. There is a land grab. Agenda 21 is real. Now it's called Agenda 2030. So we got to think outside the box of, let's have an armed revolution and a standoff and think that people are going to come to our aid. A lot of those things are federal setups. It's another situation to say that I'm going to defend myself from attack. On your property. The problem is, it is very aggressive what the county is doing, sending code enforcement officers out there with firearms that are basically, traumatizing people, saying you got to get off your land in 10 days. That's through the barrel of a gun, forcing people off their land. That is illegal. That is immoral. But do we need a standoff to accomplish our goals? Is a standoff, whether it be in Burns, Oregon or Costilla County, going to fix the problem? And so Costilla County is a beautiful place. It's a beautiful place to live off the grid. You got to haul your own water. You got to pay for certain things, But for years, it's been far more affordable to do it here than elsewhere. And I do recommend people strategically relocate to this general area of the Southwest if they're genuinely concerned about larger events down the line. Geopolitical threats, world war, civil unrest. And so to me, it's really a tragedy if people are prevented from living on their land that they own outright. My friend Daryl Carter, Vietnam veteran, land valued at over $30,000. They kicked him off his land because his cabin, which came with the land, it was built in 1999. The cabin was only 144 square feet. He wasn't growing marijuana. He wasn't dumping trash. He wasn't stealing water. He was living up in the mountains that they believe, some of those residents in San Luis, that in fact is their land. That these new white residents don't have the right to come in and hold the deed or title to their land. And so in a world where, you see all this crying wolf and, ooh, white genocide here, look at all the mixed babies, we're so scared about, what the world population, racial demographic will be in 2040, 2050. That's sad. That's really sad. What you had in Costilla County were white Americans and others, because it was really a multicultural community. They were pushed off their land illegally. And while there were some media reports, in the latter ones, they were almost siding with the county. So, we're concerned about people freezing to death. No, you're not. There's nothing compassionate about making people that are already living in their RV, go live in a public space, in like a Walmart parking lot. No. People moved here to live off the grid in freedom. And if Americans are just going to stand by and allow this to take place and go, well, if I can't go live off the grid, or if I don't approve of what they're doing, or if I think it's strange to live off the grid, well, I'm not going to support them. So the media is there to galvanize that angst that already exists and redirect it. Here, look over here at the Burns, Oregon protest. Get behind this controlled movement. Put your energy here. Direct your thoughts and energy here. Meanwhile, you have Americans living the American refugee experience that, just want to be left alone. This issue does involve the BLM. This issue does involve the federal government, but specifically with regards to Costilla County. A lot of that stuff was coming from the local government. Now, that's something that people have a better chance of doing something about. Whether it be getting in their own candidate or community members working together to make sure that they go to all the county meetings and that they film it and that they speak for their 3 minutes. That type of civic participation. Even if it's a corrupt government. Even if those are officers that have engaged in threatening people that have exercised their free speech, which Costilla County deputies did. That should only result in more cameras, more free speech, more media. Not armed revolution, and not people just giving up and going, well, Alex, we don't know if we can trust you. You're not down with the violent revolution and standoff. You called out Roger Marsh. Yes, I did. Because Roger Marsh, a real outsider, who wasn't even living off the grid, who lived in a motel at the Grizzly Inn. In no way did this guy appear to be legitimate. But he claimed he was a veteran. He claimed he was a 3%er. He claimed he wanted to set up a militia. Then people stopped and they listened. Now, a lot of people saw he was crazy. But they still listened for a few minutes and more anyways. And I would even say that some residents could even be described as a Roger Marsh loyalist. I've always had libertarian friends and friends that have been involved in the sovereign movement, but not militants. What we've seen in recent years is a sharp increase in infiltration of sovereign groups, in groups being demonized as domestic terrorist organizations, white supremacist organizations. And a lot of that for years has been bullshit. But there is a demographic of white America that is susceptible to the racist programming that can easily be led into these traps. As we see this so-called Patriot movement in Burns, Oregon, it's heartbreaking. And so at this point, I don't know what's going to be coming next in Costilla County. But unless there's some form of patriotic, constitutional organization at the local level within this county, they are going to continue to push people off their land and make it harder for the real patriots and survivalists that already bought their land, that plan on coming here later. They're going to find the big, large, hypothetical locked door, locked gate awaiting them. People need to think about the battles that they pick. And people need to think about their tactics. And so while it's good that there were a lot of blogs that were put out about Costilla County, and if you want some more background information, just type in Costilla County off the grid under Google, including news. You can even type in my name and see my video series. At this point in time, with no real grassroots organization or a committee for landowners that actually live here in Costilla County, now, I have to tell you the truth, there is no organization. Everybody's been divided. And a certain chunk or demographic of those that are online that see themselves as patriots, that are interested in Costilla County or have had interest in Costilla County or live here already, a lot of them are looking at this Burns thing, thinking that that is legitimate. By the way, there are some other residents that identify with socialism and Bernie Sanders. And so, certain political allegiances, also Donald Trump, can really prevent people from coming together in an off-grid community sense and putting aside their differences and hearing each other out. To me, that's revolution. That is evolution. That is real evolution of consciousness, where we can put aside our racial and our political and our class differences and work together on the issues that matter. So that is where I will conclude. The Patriot movement as a whole dropped the ball on Costilla County. And as this year progresses, I'll be back with additional reports on the situation with Costilla County. You can also check out some of my recent videos where I talk about why I don't believe this whole situation in Burns, Oregon is credible, why it appears to be an operation led by the feds. I'm Alex Ansary signing off for the 7th of January, 2016.